Dust hung over the fairground like sifted ash. Noon sun burned the canvas tent, and flies buzzed high, trapped in heat. The auction block was a wagon flatbed, boards warped, nails poking through like nettles. A bell clanged. Bidders drifted closer, chewing tobacco, joking about bargains. The auctioneer's voice cracked from long sale. Colts, churns, a broken harmonium. Last lot stood alone near the rear wheel. She was small, 20 maybe, dress of plain dust-brown sack, cinched with frayed twine. Bare feet blackened by road miles curled on the plank. Head bowed, braid clipped short, eyes lost beneath its shadow. Leather cuff dangled from one wrist. Symbol, not shackle. The sign leaned against her ankle read, Lot 42. House help, $3 start. Laughter rippled. Cheaper than a sack of flour. Cal Holloway eased from the crowd, coat patched, spectacles fogged by sweat. He had come to sell a box of primers, maybe by chalk. Instead, he stared at the girl as one stares at a quiet desk in an empty classroom, space waiting for purpose. She did not lift her gaze. The bidding began at 50 cents. A ranch hand snorted, waved a greasy coin. A gambler offered 75, more to amuse the crowd than invest. The girl flinched at nothing. Holloway's hand found a leather purse in his coat. 3 silver dollars lay inside, salary for 2 months, meant for winter coal. He felt the cool weight, heard children's voices in his mind reciting morning tables. Saw their bare feet in frost last December. 150. Gambler called. 2. Ranch hand countered. The auctioneer pumped the crowd with a grin. Dust swirled over the platform, coating the girl's shoulders. She swayed, maybe from hunger, maybe the sun. Holloway stepped forward. $3. He did not shout. He stated it the way a teacher corrects spelling. Final, unquestioned. The crowd hushed. The ranch hand spat, shrugged. The gambler twirled his coin, pocketed it. No higher offer came. Gavel struck. The sound cracked air, and for a beat, all noise ceased. Holloway placed 3 coins in the auctioneer's palm, signed a chit he barely read, and climbed the wagon step. Up close he smelled dust baked into cloth. Faint lilac beneath grime, lingering after some forgotten wash. He offered his hand. She hesitated, then set her fingers on his knuckles. Dry, bird-like. Her eyes lifted, gray, unstartled, neither grateful nor afraid, simply measuring. They walked through the midway past barrels of fry grease and squealing hogs, past men who look away, embarrassed by their own jokes. Holloway guided her to the school wagon, an old cart with a canvas cover and bundles of primers. He set a canteen on the footboard. She drank slow. Water glistened on her lip before the sun stole it. "What's your name?" he asked. Words rasped in his throat. He had not spoken since yesterday's spelling bee. She swallowed, shook her head barest inch. Not refusal, only absence of answer. He nodded as if she had spoken volumes. He lifted her onto the bench, climbed aside, flicked reins. The horse plodded west, hooves thudding dull over packed earth. Dust-haloed wheels settled on their shoulders. She sat straight, hands folded, gazed forward. Noon slid into long gold. Heat softened. Cicadas tuned evening. 2 miles beyond town the schoolhouse rose, single room, paint peeled to gray bone. A low bell hung over the door. He halted the wagon, helped her down. Boards creaked under their weight. Inside, desks lined in 3 rows, chalk smell mingling with sun-warmed pine. Cobwebs trailed the rafters where rain had seeped. He pointed to the teacher's chair, to the cupboard, to the pump outside. Simple gestures, water, rest, bread. She nodded. He fetched a tin plate, set stale loaf, cut a square cheese. She broke bread in half, handed him the larger piece. He shook his head. She insisted with steady eyes. He accepted, ate. Night settled. Crickets replaced the last cart rattle from town. He unrolled a blanket in the corner storage room. His quarters since his wife died 3 winters past, and gestured she take the cot near the back wall. She sat on its edge, feet dangling above worn floorboards. He lit a lamp, then paused by the doorway. "You'll be safe here," he managed. She watched the flame inside the glass, then offered a single slow nod. He lay awake listening. Boards expanding, wind stroking tin roof, the faint shift of her weight on the cot. Somewhere a coyote yipped. She did not stir. At an hour when even memories sleep, he heard her cross the classroom barefoot. She knelt by the doorway, traced fingertip across the bell's clapper, silencing it before dawn. Morning broke harsh and bright. Holloway woke to find the slate boards washed, desks dusted, windows propped for breeze. The girl stood at the pump, watering a patch of earth where prairie grass fought clay. Children arrived in twos and threes, eyes widening at the stranger. She offered each a slice of bread from last night's loaf, dipped in well water. They giggled, accepted, stared as crumbs stuck to her silent smile. Class began. Holloway read from McGuffey's, but his thoughts snagged on the quiet figure now wiping chalk from his sleeve between lessons. She moved like a breath, never in the way, always at the moment of need. A dropped slate, a spilled ink pot, a tear over a missed answer. She spoke not a word. At recess a paper kite snagged in the cottonwood. Boys jeered while the smallest cried. The girl climbed the trunk barefoot, retrieved the kite, returned with a bow so small it looked like wind. The crying stopped. Holloway watched from the porch. $3 silver poorer, and suddenly richer than he had felt in 5 winters. That evening after the children left, she remained, sweeping dust devils from corners. He poured 2 cups of weak coffee. She accepted, drank slow. He gestured to the cot, the storage room, the pump, again offering the boundaries he could give. She touched her chest, then the desk, then his hand. A question. He understood only her eyes. "Fiona," he said, choosing a name because the classroom needed one. She considered, then placed her palm on his chest and said, almost breathless, "Fiona." The name settled into the rafters like a sparrow finding its first roost. As dusk deepened, distant thunder murmured. Holloway studied the horizon, saw more than storm clouds, saw dust plumes too straight, too fast. Riders. Trouble weeks ahead, perhaps, but trouble. He closed the door, set the bar, turned to Fiona. She tilted her head, reading tracks he could not. She did not look afraid. Instead, she touched the bell's rope and gave it one soft tug. No sound, but promised that when next it rang, it would summon more than students. Outside, dusk swallowed the trail. Inside, desks waited for tomorrow, and beside the pump a small green shoot poked through the dirt where no shoot had ever grown. The bell rang thin in the dry air, and 20 children tumbled to the doorway like wind-blown wheat, laughing, fighting for front desks. Fiona moved among them before Cal could raise his hand for order. A finger to the lips, a brush of dust from a sleeve, a quick knot in a ribbon. No words, yet hush settled. He set multiplication on the slate. While heads bent, Fiona unwrapped a strip of muslin filled with dried berries she had gathered at dawn. One by one she slipped them onto desks, crimson specks against cracked pine. No child spoke, but jaws worked and pencils scratched smoother. During reading hour the smallest boy, Lonnie, froze on the word thirst. Tears welled. Fiona knelt, took his book, traced the letters with a fingertip, tapped his chest, tapped her own. He breathed, tried again, the word flowing like creek water. He grinned gap-toothed. She answered with the faintest smile. Cal marked the moment in his ledger. Quiet girl teaches courage. At lunch she carried the kettle outside, poured a thin stream over the dust patch she'd chosen yesterday. Children circled. She pressed 3 fingertips into the mud, then pointed to the cloudless sky. "Rain," Josephine asked. Fiona shook her head, touched the ground again. "Rain begins here." They copied the gesture, small hands patting the earth. By recess end, tiny prints ringed the patch like petals. Days telescoped. Each morning she rose before daylight to fetch water, leaving damp footprints on the porch that steamed in sunrise. Cal found his chalk laid neatly by size, lesson pages pressed flat beneath a stone. He began to rely on these silent arrangements, like breath or heartbeat. Friday brought a stifling heat that glued shirts to skin. The stovepipe popped even though no fire burned. Cal's head swam while grading sums. Fiona appeared, pressed a cool rag steeped in mint to his temple. Her scent, dry sage with smoke, faint lilac, drove the dizziness away. He tried to thank her. She touched the rag, then his chest, and returned to mending a child's torn sleeve. That afternoon a dust column rose beyond the cottonwoods. 3 riders at lazy pace, rifles slung. Cal's pulse climbed. Fiona watched from the doorway, braid lifting in the breeze. As the riders passed without stopping, she turned him and drew a short line on her forearm. Then another, parallel. Tracks close, danger near. He nodded, and that night he cleaned the shotgun Mary had buried in the bottom drawer. The first time since the funeral. Saturday meant no lesson bell, yet children arrived anyway. Curious about the quiet girl, she led them to the pump, gave each a pebble, and showed how to drop it in tin cups. Plink for letter sounds, plunk for syllables. Soon spellings rang beneath the cottonwood, laughter chasing them. Cal watched from the sill, shotgun across knees, wondering what magic cost $3 and whether he could ever repay it. At dusk, Josephine's mother arrived, cheeks red, carrying a bundle. For the girl, she said, thrusting it into Cal's hands. Inside, a calico dress, hand-stitched, small but bright. Cal hesitated at Fiona's door, then left the bundle on her cot. Dawn found the dress already hanging by the pump, sleeves fluttering like flags. Fiona wore the same plain shift as always. She had turned the gift into a curtain for the window that leaked most dust. She met Cal's puzzled gaze without apology. By midweek, the well crank cracked in his grip, would long rotted. He cursed under breath. Fiona knelt, inspected the brake, vanished behind the shed, returned with a length of wagon spoke and wire. Together, they lashed a splint around the handle. When Cal cranked again, the bucket rose steady. She brushed her hands, meeting his eyes with calm that held no boast. The schoolhouse gained a new lesson that day. Repair comes before complaint. Thursday noon thunder rolled, a low, endless drum. Not clouds, hoofbeats. 5 riders this time, dust boiling behind. Children froze at windows. Cal's heart hammered. He reached for the shotgun. Fiona caught his wrist, shook her head. She stepped outside alone, hands open. Riders slowed. Curious. She lifted a piece of slate, chalked a single arrow pointing north. She tapped the sky, then the road. Road north meant Fort Cairn, soldiers and payroll. The men laughed, thanked her with a mock salute, and rode on. She returned, palms dusty but unshaken. Cal exhaled, unaware he'd stopped breathing. That night storm clouds finally gathered, flickering violet on the horizon. Fiona laid a row of tin cups outside, mouths open to the promise. In the classroom, Cal found her name on the attendance roll. Fiona Gray. Pen in his own hand, though, he did not remember writing it. Lightning split the dark. Rain hammered the roof. Through the panes, he saw her step into the downpour, face tilted, dress plastering the thin shoulders. He grabbed a blanket, met her at the doorway. She accepted it, but remained in the rain, watching as the dusty patch by the pump turned to slick red earth. She knelt, pressed fingertips into the mud, exactly where the children's prints had dried days before. Cal understood. The ground remembered. Morning dawned cold, clean. School bell rang. Children filed in barefoot to feel wet earth between toes. On each desk waited a smooth stone painted with the child's initial, Fiona's work while they slept. Laughter spilled like creek water. During spelling lesson, the door banged open. The same 5 riders stood in the frame, rifles leveled. Leader's eyes swept to the cupboard that held the tuition box. 2 weeks' coins, less than a man might lose in 1 game of poker. "Hand it over," he barked. Chalk dropped from Cal's fingers. Children screamed. Fiona stepped between rifles and desks. Bare feet, silent on pine, blankets still around her shoulders. She raised one hand, shook her head once. Leader laughed. "Move, girl." She did not. He cocked the lever. Metal rang. Cal reached for the shotgun. Too far. Fiona drew the blanket tighter, spread it like a curtain shielding every desk. Her voice rose. First time any child heard it. Soft, steady. "You shoot me. Bullet stop. You pass me. Fire burns." Words like river stones. Small, impossible to push aside. The youngest child crawled under her blanket edge and clutched her ankle. Leader hesitated. Thunder rumbled behind his eyes. He spat, waved rifle toward Cal. "Open the box." Cal shook his head. Sweat stung the scar under his collar. Fiona's blanket shield trembled but did not lower. Seconds stretched knife thin. Then hoofbeats outside, townfolk alerted by screams. Mrs. Hargrove's voice, sharp as a whip. "We're here, Cal." Rifles faltered. Leader cursed, back to the door. His men followed, boots thudding. Outside, townspeople brandished hoes, pitchforks, one ancient revolver. The riders mounted, galloped away. Dust swallowed them. Inside, silence broke into sobs. Fiona knelt, pulled the blanket around 3 shaking children, rocked them until breath steadied. Cal approached, shotgun dangling, voice gone ragged. "You didn't run." She met his eyes, answered with a whisper. "Never leave roots." Late afternoon light slanted through broken latch, painting the floor in bars of gold. The tuition box remained unopened, untouched. Children took turns ringing the bell until palms reddened. Each clang sounded like a promise kept. Cal found Fiona by the pump, washing blood, someone's nosebleed from the blanket edge. He tried to speak thanks. She touched his arm, shook her head. Above them, rain clouds gathered again, but softer, like gray already be spun into something warm. He looked at the girl who cost $3 and realized no ledger could measure the worth of a root that refused to pull free when rifles pointed and wind screamed run. Rain returned in sheets that night, trapping the heat of fear inside the little schoolroom. Fiona patched the shattered latch with scrap tin. Cal spread dry quilts along the floor, letting the children sleep in rows like seedlings under straw. He kept the shotgun across his knees, but each time thunder cracked, he looked at the quiet girl for courage and found it waiting in her steady breath. At dawn, she threaded a strip of muslin through a sewing needle and mended the blanket she'd used as a shield. Her fingers shook when the cloth brushed a powder burn hole, yet she never paused. Outside, rooster calls wobbled on nervous air. Cal stepped on the porch, saw fresh hoof prints gouging the wet road. Riders had circled during the storm, scouting in darkness. He crossed the yard of the church bell and rang it once, low and slow. Townsfolk drifted in. Mrs. Hargrove with her pitchfork, old Mr. Dunn still loading a cap-and-ball pistol, 2 ranch hands ashamed of yesterday's absence. They formed a huddle around Cal's map. The school, the pump, the cottonwood, blind walls of cornstalks. Fiona stood apart, listening to wind. "Pike's gang will be back," Cal said. "They know the county payroll comes Monday." The men muttered about fetching deputies 10 miles off. Fiona shook her head, drew a line in the mud from a ridge to the schoolhouse, placed 3 stones in crescent, meaning soon, meaning here. Plan born. Move children to the loft, bar the stairs. Hold the gang until deputies arrive. Cal assigned lookouts, but fear coated every face. When the crowd dispersed to gather tools, only Fiona lingered. She pointed to her patched blanket, then at herself, then at the door. She would stay downstairs. Cal tried to protest. She touched the scar on his cheek, traced toward his heartbeat, as if to remind him who still breathed because she had not run. He swallowed words and merely nodded. By noon, clouds lifted, leaving the world too bright. Pike came with 6 men, rifles clean, laughter raw. They rode straight to the pump. Cal's watchers melted. Only Fiona on the steps, small as a broom straw, blocked the doorway. She wore the calico curtain now as a shawl, the sky-blue squares fluttering around her wrists. Pike swung down, thumbs and belt. "Girl, move." She didn't. He lifted his Winchester, muzzle inches from her chest. Her eyes flicked to his boots. Dust dried where rain hadn't reached. She spoke softly one sentence. "Shoot me and the bell will ring." Pike smirked until he saw the rope in her hand tied to the clapper overhead. One tug would clang the alarm. Inside the loft, children waited silent, till beside them, shotgun trained on the trapdoor. Sweat blurred his vision. He listened for Fiona's signal, for gunfire, for anything. Below, Pike weighed coin versus commotion. He gestured. 2 men circled the building to find another door. She shifted just enough, so the wind caught her shawl and flared it like a flag. One rifle but struck her shoulder. She dropped to one knee, but kept hold of the bell rope. Blood blossomed through the calico squares. She looked up at Pike, still kneeling, still between him and the children. Behind the school, a crash. Mr. Dunn's pistol firing early, ranch hands shouting. Pike cursed, kicked the door. Fiona yanked the rope. The bell screamed, high and frantic. Children in the loft pressed hands to ears. Cal pushed them back, then slid down the stairs. Pike's men dragged sacks toward the cupboard, but Cal burst out with the shotgun. One blast shattered the payroll box's padlock. Coins spilling like hail. Men dove aside. Fiona rose, used her shawl like a sling, sweeping coins into the open doorway, forcing Pike to sidestep or trip. He stumbled. She caught his rifle barrel with her bare hands, turned it skyward as it fired through the roof. Deputy whistles cut the heat. 2 riders racing up the road at last, townsfolk at their heels. Pike shoved Fiona away, sprinted for his horse, but Beth and Marigold appeared from behind the water trough, tugging a rope that released a stack of feed sacks. They tumbled over Pike, pinning him. His men fled under pistol shots, leaving the leader cursing in dust and scattered silver. Deputies clapped irons on him, nodded thanks to Cal, who knelt beside Fiona. The muslin patch on her shoulder soaked red, but the bullet had only grazed. Children swarmed, sobbing and laughing. She raised one trembling hand, wiped Lonnie's tears first. 2 days later, the county judge arrived. In front of the whole town, he praised the schoolmaster's brave stand. Cal corrected him, voice steady. She stood. We followed. He pressed the judge to mark the deed. The territory would hire Fiona Gray as assistant teacher, salary $8 a month. The room gasped. The judge shrugged, signed. That evening, Cal laid 8 silver coins on the desk. Fiona picked up 6, walked outside, and slipped 3 into Mrs. Hargrove's mailbox, 3 into old Mr. Dunn's coat pocket while he dozed. She kept only a copper cent in the calico square. Blood washed out, fabric faded to soft pink. At dawn, Cal found her at the pump planting seeds in the children's mud circle. His chest hurt, not from cough, but from the weight of seeing someone value every inch of ground more than silver. He knelt opposite, pressed his palm into the wet soil beside hers. A week later, the first shoots broke through, green as new promises. The bell rang for class, and 2 names graced the board. Mr. Holloway and, written in a careful hand that once trembled at gunfire, Miss Gray. Children filed in beneath the blue calico curtain. Unaware of its history, breathing safe air earned for $3 and 1 unmovable heart. Winter slipped in under the doorframe before anyone spoke its name. Frost turned cornstalk stubble to glass, and the pump handle screamed each morning until Fiona warmed it with her palms. She kept a tin box of pine pitch and rabbit fat near the stove. When a child's knuckles cracked, she dabbed the sow without a word, then guided small fingers back around a pencil. Cal hollowed 2 extra notches in the attendant's plank by the door. 1 for Miss Gray, 1 for Hope. That was what the children insisted the new bell should be called after its scream saved their lives. Together, he and Fiona rehung it with braided fence wire. She tapped it once, gentle, letting only she and he hear the note. Christmas week, the coughing sickness rode the stage line from Dustin, filling chests with gravel. Mrs. Hargrove's youngest lay wheezing in a quilt, face waxen. The circuit doctor shrugged, said prayers travel faster than medicine. Fiona packed her satchel. Elder bark horehound, a jar of honey dark as dusk. Cal hitched the mare, drove her through sleet to the farmhouse. She brewed a tea so bitter even the fever fought to leave. By dawn the boy's breaths came clear, shallow but sure. Hargrove wept against the doorframe. Fiona pressed the last spoon of honey into her hand. Snow fell that night, sealing every path. Cal shoveled until his arms shook, but drifts returned. Fiona joined him, tied the calico curtain around her neck for warmth. They cleared a narrow trail from the schoolhouse to the woodshed, 1 line out, 1 line back. Inside, children huddled around the stove, lesson books forgotten for stories. When the logs hissed low, Fiona slipped outside, dragged the sled alone, cheeks blazing. Cal met her halfway, took the rope, and together they hauled, grinning at each other like co-conspirators against winter. On New Year's Eve, the town gathered in the schoolroom, walls strung with paper chains. Lonnie read a poem he'd penned about a $3 angel. Laughter mingled with tears when Beth recited the sums of gratitude. 22 healed fingers, 12 polished desks, 1 bell named Hope. Mayor Tisdale stepped forward, cleared his throat, and presented Fiona with a deed, half an acre behind the school, to plant whatever root she chooses. Fiona stared at the parchment, then at Cal. He felt the question in her silence and answered by placing his callous thumbprint beside hers under the seal. The mayor sealed it again with a flourish, and half the town cheered, half wiped eyes. February winds rattled windows like dice in a tin cup. One storm night, lightning struck the lone cottonwood. Flames clawed the trunk, threatening the roof. Fiona and Cal raced outside. Snow stung their faces as they shoveled drifts against the base, stamping fire into hiss and steam. When the trunk finally sagged, blackened, Fiona knelt, pressed her forehead to the scar. Cal touched her shoulder, felt heat still pulsing beneath bark. "Not dead," she whispered. "Waiting." They cut the broken limb into planks, stacking them beside the pump for a future gate. Spring thaw turned the yard to soup. Fiona coaxed the children to press sunflower seeds into the mud behind the school, 1 seed for every letter they learned. Cal counted 26 neat rows, same as the alphabet. When shoots broke soil, the class clapped in unison, the sound echoing like hoofbeats of something kinder than trouble. June arrived with a wagon load of books donated by the state. Cal watched Fiona cradle each volume, as if tucking a child to sleep. She stamped the inside covers, Gray and Holloway Schoolhouse. Ink bled slightly on rough pages, binding her name to his in quiet permanence. On the anniversary of the auction, Cal rose before dawn, hitched the mare, and headed to town alone. He returned at dusk with a pine crate. Fiona met him by the steps, brow furrowed. He pried off the lid. Inside lay a single silver bell, small enough for a child's hand, clapper-tied with a ribbon dyed the same faded pink as her patched shawl. He handed it to her, voice rough as gravel. "For the day they ring you home." She weighed the bell, then slipped the ribbon over his wrist instead, tying a simple knot. "Home already rang," she said, the sentence soft yet clear. She hung the bell above the new garden gate, made from cottonwood planks. Evening light caught its curve. The note carried, thin but certain, across fields greening under dusk. That night they sat on the porch grading papers. Cal's hand brushed hers. She didn't move away. Crickets started their hymn. He cleared his throat once, twice, then spoke. $3 bought dust on a road. Why receive was rain. Fiona turned, eyes reflecting lantern flame, and answered with the slightest nod, as though she had known his words long before he found them. Inside, the candle burned low. Outside, the bell's faint chime mingled with frog song. Wind rustled wheat seedlings that would soon rise chest high, seated by hands that never ran when rifles came. The schoolyard slept, but hope kept silent watch overhead, ready to shout if danger ever tried to cross their threshold again. And behind the building, on half an acre of deeded promise, sunflowers reached for a sky now generously willing to rain. If Fiona's $3 courage struck a chord, tap subscribe, hit the like, and share in the comments which scene. The silent auction, the blanket shield before the rifles, or the bell named Hope, left its mark on you. Your voices keep these frontier stories riding on.